Novosad.
Thank you, Rosalind. I want to just first thank you for inviting me to speak here. I appreciate it very much. It's an opportunity to get to talk to a different set of folks that I don't normally do. So thank you guys for coming. Appreciate y'all taking time out to come and hear me. Can you hear me okay in the back?
Yes.
Okay. Because I tend to wander around.
Well, that's okay. That's loud.
So what we're going to talk about is connected vehicles, autonomous vehicles. What are they? Where are they? Where are we going with them? So first we'll cover a little bit of background, and then I'm going to focus in on connected vehicle for a while, then we'll focus in on autonomous vehicle for a while, and then we're going to focus in on what I believe is the future, which is automated vehicles. And you'll understand what that is when we get to it. We'll talk a little bit about the connected vehicle program that USDOT has going on, specifically the THEA pilot that Rosalind mentioned, and then where are we going and how do we get ready. So some background. Between now and the year 2040, at the current rate of crashes in the U.S. and deaths in the U.S., we're going to have 1 million people die. Throughout the world, in that same time frame, we're looking at 40 million deaths. So one of the ideas behind connected vehicle is that the research that USDOT has done says that 80% of unimpaired crashes can be avoided with connected vehicle-to-vehicle technology. So imagine 80% of those crashes going away. Safety, obviously that's like the top priority for everybody, keeping everyone safe. There's a lot of benefits to connected, a lot of benefits to automated. There's been a lot of people out there that have, over the last 15 years, become to support this and understand what it is. My company did a survey and found out that 90% of the people obviously are in favor of, yeah, let's do this technology because it's going to save lives. The biggest challenge we'll face, and it's going on now, is how do we get the technology out there? It's there. It's not quite ready for prime time, but how do we get it into the cars? That's the trick. And so, because the higher penetration of cars you have, the more success you'll have in saving lives. So we believe that where we're at in transportation is a disruptive force. I mean, we're talking about a complete game changing about the way we go through transportation. One of the examples one of my coworkers gives is, imagine if we're in a fully autonomous world. Every car is autonomous, so you got to go forward however many years you think that is. But suddenly your 12-foot lane lifts can come down to 8 to 10 feet. So you can gain a lane of capacity just simply by shrinking the lanes because everything's autonomous, everything's taken care of. So throughput will become better. People's habits are going to change. We're always connected. I mean, everybody's got a smartphone in here, I assume. I put mine up so it wouldn't ring, but you've got a smartphone, you're connected. And the connections are going to continue and continue and continue. And ironically, everything seems to center around, in my mind, around transportation, because that's our lifeline, right? That's how we get around. That's how our goods get here to us that we buy. And so we believe it's really going to be a disruption for our transportation system. These are a couple other disruptions you can think of. 511, I don't know how many of y'all are familiar with that. Anybody? So in many states, not in Texas, you can call 511 and get traveler information. It'll give you travel times from where you are to where you're going. It'll tell you about incidents on your route. You can personalize routes. So it's a whole call in. It's a voice. Most of them are voice, interactive voice recognition. So you talk to it, and it gives you information back. And then, of course, tolling was a major disruption. And now we have all electronic tolling where you can just breeze right along. But it changed the way people do things. I came here on the toll road today, first time ever. I come from San Antonio, and Google took me off on Grand Parkway, and I was like, this is awesome. It was me and 7 cars almost the whole way. I was thrilled. I didn't have to go through the 610-59 interchange. So I don't know if you're in favor of tolls or not, but I like them just because it gets me where I need to go. So let's talk about connected vehicle. We'll talk about the beginning. Connected vehicle actually started in the early 1990s, and we'll talk about what that is. And then we'll talk about the past, what I call the past from 2004 to 2011. That's really when it took off. That's when there was a concerted effort by USDOT to make something happen. There were some bumps and bruises along the way. The present I call 2015, and then the future is basically this year on out. But, well, yeah, so in the beginning, in 1990, roughly 4 or 3, out in California, there was a platoon of cars that went down, I don't remember which freeway, but it was, they put hockey pucks in the freeway, and they put little optical readers on the cars underneath, and the cars read those pucks and followed each other in a platoon. That was really the first connected or automated attempt by the government per se. It was called IVHS, Integrated Vehicle Highway System. From that, it kind of just floated along, and you didn't hear much about it. Then in 2003, the USDOT had been meeting behind closed doors, trying to woo the automakers, and they came out with something called Vehicle Integration Initiative, or VII. So VII was the real start of that. And what VII did was it uses a spectrum called the 5.9 gigahertz, of 5.9 gigahertz called Dedicated Short-Range Communications. This protocol was designed from the ground up with security in mind. It's very high speed, very low latency, so the opportunity to exchange messages very fast in real time. Something you would need if your car and my car were about to collide with each other. We need to know that rather instantaneously, right? They need to get the cooperation of the OEMs. That was a challenge. I went to the first public meeting in 2003. The USDOT guy said, we're all a big happy family. We're going to deploy 150,000 hotspots after the OEMs put the radios in the car. The OEM guy out there said, I don't know what you're talking about. We're not doing anything till you guys put those hotspots out there. So that's kind of how it started. But what you will see now is it's a completely different spectrum when we get to where we are today. So USDOT, regardless of that story, pouring money. They've poured over $500 million into this research since 2003 and more. And looking at how we can make these vehicles communicate, what it takes, how we do it, what type of interference, security. Obviously, we don't want the car hacked, right? You've probably seen some of the videos of the Jeep wagon that got hacked. So you got to be careful about that, obviously. There was a shift. As we change administrations, obviously the leadership at the top changes, and when Mr. Brubaker came into power, he didn't really see DSRC as a solution. He said, why do we need that? We can use Wi-Fi, we can use cellular, it's already there, we can use that. Well, he didn't understand that you have to have that, real-time secure communication. Basically what we were talking about when we talk a little more depth, what we're doing is we're communicating 10 times a second. Vehicles broadcast their location, speed, position, heading 10 times a second. So, and it's got to be received, processed, and moved so that you know what's going on. So he pushed for a broader spectrum. So what happened was, I'll tell you I think it's a funny story. I'm sure USDOT doesn't. About this time, they rebranded the VII to something called IntelliDrive. And IntelliDrive was supposed to be kind of the end-all to meet-all. And then about 6 or 9 months after that, all of a sudden, IntelliDrive disappeared from the USDOT website. I mean, people thought the program was over. What happened? Well, apparently, whoever did the research on IntelliDrive didn't do their research very well, and it's copyrighted. And so now they'll never admit that, but if you Google IntelliDrive, you'll find the people that have it. And so they had to shift now, and they came up with the term connected vehicle, which is the term we use today. And their initial focus is on vehicle to vehicle, making vehicles communicate with others. So you do collision avoidance at intersections. If you got a car about to run the red light and your light's already green, you get that warning. My belief is that it's not going to necessarily keep you from completely crashing every time, but it's going to minimize the crash. It's going to give you enough time to react. Now, if the car is automatically reacting, which we'll talk about later, that's a different issue, right? So Connected Vehicle was born, and out of that they came out with these affiliated test beds. So if you were a organization or a DOT or whoever that wanted to be involved in connected vehicle technology, was willing to put in some money to do a little bit of their own research, you could become one of these affiliated test beds. And what's been going on in the meantime, if you kind of think back, is that you've got these manufacturers out there who are building what we call roadside units. Those are the ones that you deploy along the roadside. You can think of those just like a signal controller or something like that. And then you have your onboard units, which are the ones that are communicating with each car, and then also with the roadside. And we'll talk about the difference, what those do. But you could have those beds set up so that people could come and test their devices to see, does it work right? Of course, standards are also evolving all at this time. They're still not all done. And so we have this whole world of standards and testing and evolving and security. It's all trying to happen simultaneously. So you can imagine how complex the problem is. So where are we today? We're a lot further. In 2012, the US DOT released a pilot called Safety Pilot Model Deployment. It was awarded to the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. It was about it's up to about $24, $25 million now. What it was the first pilot deployment of the connected vehicle devices and infrastructure. It focused primarily on vehicle-to-vehicle communication. There were 7 different apps, some of which you can get today on your car because they have radars and things like that on, like blind spot warning or lane departure warning. But other things like vehicle-to-vehicle crashes were tested. So there's a whole myriad of applications that they were testing. They got 2,800 cars and buses, and actually a few 18-wheelers, and they ran them around this 27-mile course. And the cars were people every day, just like you and me. They volunteered to do this. There was a small incentive. Basically the way they did it was they went to the local schools and said, hey, if your parents will sign up, you can get your parents to sign up to participate and have this device in their car. We'll donate $200 to your PTA. So for every parent that signed up or every family that signed up, they got that $200. So it was a win-win situation. There was a lot of testing that happened during there. A lot of new issues came out. A lot of issues were solved. That program actually is still kind of going on and still growing. I was actually up there about a month and a half ago, and they were still retrofitting cars with new devices and such. So that program continues to move forward. One of the downsides to what's going on is all our connectivity, right? We all have smartphones, we all have tablets, we all have laptops, they all use Wi-Fi. Well, Wi-Fi spectrum is finite, and so every time more people come online, then we have to use more bandwidth. So the big boys, the AT&Ts, the Ciscos, all of them have been going to the FCC and saying, hey, that 5.9 gigahertz that you allocated back in 1999 to the government for this vehicle safety is not being extensively used. We want to get a share of that. Well, we, on our side of the fence, we're like, no, we don't want that because we don't want any potential interference. So the FCC has been going back and forth on what they're going to do. And in my opinion, they're leaning toward sharing the spectrum. It hasn't been ruled that way yet, but there's a lot of that going on because there's obviously those guys have tons of lobby money and really can push that issue. If you get interested and you think that's something you want to that you care about, contact your congressman and tell them not to share that spectrum because it's important for us. Because I'll just give you a perfect example, and I don't know how real world this is, but I think it's one that you're driving down the car, you're trying to communicate with other vehicles, and your kid's watching a movie in the back, right? It's all streaming live, and your vehicle gets interference because he's watching the movie. It misses the opportunity to say, hey, there was a car coming from the left and you have a wreck. Now, how real world is that? I don't know, but my opinion is that that potential is there. So I would encourage you, if you are interested, to do that. Last year in August, actually it was 2 years ago in August, 2014, NHTSA came out with a proposed rulemaking to require DSRC radios in every new vehicle. The goal was to get that rulemaking passed and become a rule by the end of this year. It's really up in the air whether that's going to happen or not. Most people believe because we're about to exchange administrations, it's not going to happen. But there's also been a push real recently to get this going again and get this rule done. So eventually, we will have this rule that's going to require DSRC. And part of the reason they're trying to get it done very quickly is obviously to protect the spectrum. Because now, if they can say, you know, within 5 years, we're going to have 20 million cars out there communicating, we got to have the spectrum. Big data. I said earlier, cars are communicating 10 times a second, providing speed, lat, lawn, heading, elevation. You can also get like brake status, wiper status, light status, indicator status. So you can get all this data off the cars. Imagine that kind of data coming off 10 times a second times millions of cars. And I have a slide later to kind of give you an idea of what that might look like. But start thinking about how much data that is. And you guys work with data, right? I mean, that's something that's important to you. And this data coming off the cars could be very important to you. You know, emissions data can be pulled off the car. And so, you know, there's opportunities there for you guys to, you know, pile into this big data and be able to have something useful for it. The connected vehicle pilots, I'm just going to move on from those. I'll talk about them in detail in a little bit. The AASHTO footprint analysis. So this was really a focus now of AASHTO. Does anybody know what AASHTO is? I'm used to talking to DOTs. So, okay, so it's the American, well, they probably know better than I do, Association of States Highway Transportation. Thank you. It's a big group. They put out something called a footprint analysis, which to look at the deployment of connected vehicle technology in the infrastructure. So taking some of the focus away, moving on from V2V because that's really kind of under control. Now how do we get the information out from the vehicles to the roadside and get information from the roadside back to the vehicles? Security solutions, that's still being worked. I can tell you right now the second version of the security management system that's going to manage all the security certificates and stuff for these is in development, and I'm going to get the project I'm working on is going to have an opportunity to actually test that. So in about 1.5 years we'll know where that is. Probably the biggest thing that happened from the private side is this last bullet. At the World Congress in 2014, that same year, GM announced in Detroit that they were going to start to deploy connected vehicle technology, so DSRC radios, in their high-end Cadillacs in the model year 2017. So later this year, if you happen to buy an STS, you'll be able to get that technology. I won't be buying an STS. All right, I've already talked about this, but just this is kind of some of the background on the FCC and the rules. Probably the biggest thing is that there is actually a competing bill out there as well, and you can see that the authors of the original Wi-Fi Innovation Act, which is the sharing the spectrum run. Senator Rubio was a author of that. So when he was running for president, I was not a fan. So the FCC is still trying to sort that out. We talked about the rulemaking, so I kind of went into all this a little ahead. The other thing I didn't say, though, is that there is also a rulemaking in process for commercial vehicles. So we expect that to come out as well. So big data. So, you know, they're talking about by 2020, there's going to be something like 60 billion connected devices throughout the world. 60 billion. So when you start looking at that, if you kind of look at where the data comes from every minute and how that's generated, this is the kind of data we're looking at every day. 2.5 quintillion bytes. I don't think anyone's ever counted that high. But so first question is, how do you store that? What do you do with it? And those are the kind of questions that another side of the house is wrestling with. You know, we're starting to generate, one of the projects I had the privilege of working on in 2011 was down in Florida, in Orlando, where the ITS World Congress was held. And we had a small deployment of connected vehicle technology. We had 43 cars with 25 roadside units. For over 2.5 days, Those cars would drive around in demonstrations. They weren't just constantly driving, so there was peaks where nobody was driving around. We generated 9 million basic safety messages with 43 cars in 2.5 days, driving around part-time. So just to start to give you a flavor for what kind of data is coming and how it's going to be there. Security, the biggest challenge obviously is going to be keep people out, and knowing when one of the devices is what we call a bad actor. You don't want to communicate with them. So those are going to be important. And then obviously the biggest thing for many of us is privacy. I don't want my private information being hacked or going out through this technology. And one of the things that's got to be clear about, when you have the technology and deployed in your car, there's no personal identification associated with it. You're just broadcasting, you're an object in space broadcasting a message. Nobody can relate that to you. So where's the future? Vehicle to infrastructure connected vehicle pilots is underway. That's something that started last September. We'll talk about that quite a bit. Security solutions are improving. Like I said, the version 2.0 is coming out. The integration of all mobile devices, that's coming. That's a challenge too, because if you get in your car and you have your car communicating, you have your smartphone, your significant other's smartphone, your children have a smartphone, and the system's all trying to figure out, okay, is that one object, 4 objects, and are they in the same space, not the same space? Because it's trying to track that, right? It's trying to figure out what's moving where it's going, and what the trajectory is, so they can make predictions about different things. So that's going to be a challenge. And then there's this whole other world of connected car. I was talking about connected vehicle, but connected car, and you may have heard connected car as a term. Some of the OEMs use it, and I'll give you a little bit of background on that. And then finally, what we'll talk about is really what I see is the merging, well, we'll get to it after autonomous vehicles, but the merging of the connected and autonomous vehicle. So let's talk about autonomous vehicles first, right? So everybody's seen some of these cars? The Google cars on the left, you've probably seen. If you go to Austin, you'll find some of those white Lexuses running around. They've got about 10 of those running around in Austin right now. The Volvo, it's not the Volvo, Daimler Chrysler truck that's operating out in Nevada right now. It actually is running some tests out there as an autonomous 18-wheeler. I put the Tesla one in there because I thought it was a really cool car. It doesn't actually, they actually haven't deployed it yet. BMW's got one that they're working on, but it's not totally there yet either. So what are autonomous vehicles? What's going on? Well, USDOT has put an emphasis on it because they had to, right? Google, Apple, Microsoft, all these guys, the OEMs are coming out and saying, hey, we're doing this. We're not waiting for the government, especially Google. Google says, we're just doing it. Of course, when they came out, they revealed, well, we've already driven 400,000 miles, and you didn't even know it. Well, okay, but that's not the way the world works, so we'll see where that goes. But that's forced the USDOT to ramp up. Auto companies have really started to push. There's 4 different levels of autonomous driving, anywhere from assisted all the way to fully autonomous. And so now you can buy cars that do a lot of what are connected vehicle or autonomous vehicle type operations, but they use radars and cameras to make the solution. So you can do lane tracking, adaptive cruise control. Anybody have adaptive cruise control in their car? It's an experience if you ever have it. Because you'll be going along about, you're keeping the gap in front of you. That's what the radar's doing. It's maintaining whatever you tell it gap it is. And if that car slows down, your car's going to go, and that car speeds up, it's going to speed back up. It's a very interesting, if you have an opportunity to try that, it's fun to do. Park assist and automated valet, that's actually available in a couple places with the cars. And then of course the Super Cruise. Actually the Super Cruise is a little different than the technology I was talking about earlier. Super Cruise is designed, so again this is on the high-end Cadillac. So they've got cameras and radar built into their car that in congestion, so adaptive cruise control is good for high speed, right? So 70, 80 miles an hour. But when you're in congestion moving 5 or 10 miles an hour, it doesn't work so well. So they've come out with Super Cruise, which does that. It allows the car to automatically keep gap, make sure it stays in lane, so you literally can take your hands off the wheel and the pedals and the brake while you're sitting in bumper-to-bumper traffic. It's an attractive feature, but it's very expensive for the car they're in. Platooning, there's many companies out there that are looking at platooning. There's a company called Peloton that does platooning with a DSRC between two vehicles. At the World Congress in Detroit, I had the opportunity to ride in the rear vehicle in two full 18-wheelers with tractors and trailers and everything. And we were going down the Detroit freeway about 65 miles an hour with about a 20-foot headway. And he was driving, he had his hands on the wheel because he had to steer, but he had no brake, no pedal, no nothing. He had his feet tucked back behind him, and we were communicating via DSRC. And the truck in front of him at 65 slammed his brakes on, and before the lights came on, we were already stopping. So they say they can run as close as 10 feet together safely, but the Trucking Association says no. Got to be a little more gap. And then, of course, Google is pushing everybody, right? I mean, Google came out. I don't know if Apple and Microsoft were in the game already. Nobody really knows. But they started talking about it after Google started talking about it or doing it. So, but they are definitely in catch-up mode. So you've got those guys. You've got the OEMs now. So autonomous is coming. And just to kind of, well, I'll hold that line for a minute because I want to wait till we get to the automated vehicles. So here's some futuristic ideas, right? How would you like to have your own personal pod? You just hop in it, and it takes you wherever you want to go, and you can go. You know, it's not going to crash, so it can go as fast as it wants, right? Really? You sure? The millennials probably believe it. I'm not so sure. And then, of course, there's an automated people mover. This was actually in Bordeaux, France. I did not get to go to this one. But this was a shuttle that was fully autonomous that took you from the convention center to the demonstration area, which was about 10 miles away, down regular traffic. Had to make a left turn or right turn on reds, the whole kind of thing. So, and I was told work without fail. So we've talked about this whole integration of devices. So again, you know, you can be in your car, you'll be able to make a reservation for dinner, you'll be able to book a hotel, you'll be able to ask your car to do, you know, whatever. You'll know that construction's coming, you know, there's a truck pulling out from the right. You name it, it could happen. So connected car. This is an interesting world I stumbled upon about 2.5 years ago, because I thought everything was connected vehicle. So I go to this conference. It was actually in Detroit, and the OEMs are there. They're playing. But then there's this whole host of companies that I've never heard of before that are doing things like gathering the gasoline prices. That if you have an app that gives you the gasoline prices in your area, I know the people that do that now. You have a person that gives you the local, like the hotel rates. I know the people that do that. I've met them. I don't know them, but and this is just a different world of. They called it connected car, and so and they're providing very much the same set of services that the U.S. government is trying to provide through connected vehicle, from the infrastructure side, right? So it's getting information into the car. Some of them were using smartphones. Some of them wanted to put stuff into the car through Wi-Fi or whatever, but nobody was using the SRC. Which was fine. You don't necessarily need the SRC to do that. But what they didn't know was I walked up to a few of them and I said, hey, you know, have you guys been working with the DOTs? And one of them looked at me and said, what's a DOT? And I'm like, we have a problem. Well, y'all have a problem. And so there was this gap. There's this gap between what the private side, this side of the private side is doing in terms of getting infotainment, directions, reservations, that kind of stuff into the car. And then the other side, which is the government side of trying to make technology work for vehicles and such, and also provide traffic information, weather information, and things like that into the car. So I actually hosted a session where I brought a few DOT people in to talk about what they were doing to these folks so they understood it. And it was a very enlightening deal. I don't know when and if that's ever going to merge, but it is interesting that there is two different pieces going on. So be aware of that. If you hear the word connected car, it's not what you hear me primarily talk about. So let's talk about this. We have connected vehicles. They started in 2003, basically 2010. That's what we talked about as the past. And then we've kind of, autonomous vehicles, I'm kind of using 2012 as my gauge. People have been experimenting with autonomous vehicles forever. I mean, 1974, there was somebody working on I've been told a story about somebody working on a BMW that would park itself in 1974. So you imagine that. I mean, that PC wasn't even invented then, so I'm not sure what they were using. But, you know, I mean, has anybody ever seen the little carts, mail carts that are automated that run around the office and stop and call your phone? Well, that's autonomous, right? So that was in the 80s. So, but I picked 2012. And then 2011, 2015, the current connected vehicles kind of made another jump. And then this whole idea of connected car started about 2010 after my research. And so all of this is kind of competing with each other, right? Because everybody's on their own path. So what has to happen? Well, I think what has to happen is you have autonomous vehicles, right? They're coming, we know that. People are pushing them. Connected car, you can do it, has a role in that. And I'll talk about what that is in a minute. So you have that. And then you have our connected vehicle. Connected car has a role in that. And to me, all that rolls together in what I call an automated vehicle. So the quote I was going to use a minute ago from one of my clients, his name is Bob Fry, he says that all cars will be connected vehicle cars, but not all autonomous cars will be are not connected. So what it really means is that right now, for example, Google, they're autonomous. They don't even want a steering wheel, right? But how do they do their technology? You know, the Google car has to drive that route. A Google car has to drive that route one time before it can be autonomous. They have to map it. And every time they drive it, they gather more information to map it. I'll tell you right now, and Google says we don't need any information from the outside world. We're self-contained in our little car. So if you're in a Google car and you hop on I-10, or you're trying to get on I-10, you're trying to go, I don't know, to Galveston or something, and I get in my autonomous car that's connected to the infrastructure, it's giving me traffic reports, and there's a wreck, and the freeway shuts down, and you're on it, what's Google going to do? It's going to stop and sit in congestion. My car is going to tell me, hey, there's a wreck on I-10, take this exit, and let's go down this arterial. So that's my big beef with Google, is that they don't really, now, they own Waze and all that, so I know they're going to do it, but that's not what they say. But getting connected vehicle technology into autonomous vehicles is very important in my mind, because now you're not relying on all the radars and sensors and such. You are also gathering information from all the vehicles around you in real time. So it can tell, imagine now, you know, you're about to crash, you have two autonomous, well, you could have one autonomous vehicle and one connected car about the crash. The autonomous vehicle is going to make calculations and avoid the wreck. You know, it's going to do what it thinks is right to avoid the wreck. But, you know, as they move forward, and they'll both take, you know, diverging paths. And then connected car, getting the information in so that, you know, ultimately when you don't have to put your hands on the wheel and you don't have to worry about the pedals, you can, you know, peruse the internet, watch movies, talk to your kids, cars can, you know, I've seen all kinds of concepts where the front seats swivel around, you play cards, you have lunch, whatever. But I will say one thing about autonomous vehicles. This is a good takeaway to think about. Because everybody thinks autonomous vehicles is great, and they are. But you're in an autonomous vehicle. There's a car in front of you that's stalled. There's a cliff off to your right. And there's a little girl in the left lane. What's the car going to do? The answer is, the ethical thing for the car to do is to go off the cliff. Which what happens? It doesn't help you at all. So that's one of the, this is where autonomous vehicles get to be a little bit sticky, is what kind of decision is the car going to make when there's a no-win situation. So this is some ideas of what people think it might look like in the near term. know, I'm just ideas of what we might see of people being able to do. Okay, I'm going to run this video for just a little bit. This is a, let's see if I can get it to work. Hang on. Come on. No, no, no. I don't think I can just click it. Nope. Maybe I'm not going to get the video to work. I got it to work earlier. Here's the mouse. Oh, there we go. Come on. There we go. So this is the vehicle. This is the future without the ethical and moral issue. So you can see right there's a platoon of buses going down your left. You're getting information about what your account balance is. That's interesting. There's a shopping mall up ahead. And there's emerging traffic coming from your right. You see the little sign there over your steering wheel. So you're just driving along, and everybody's communicating, and then suddenly down the road, and don't ask me how autonomous cars crash, because I don't know, but there's a wreck. And so now that information is starting to be communicated back to the different systems, different cars, and so eventually what happens is that information reaches us in our car. The information also goes to the traffic management center, which you'll see here in a second. So now you're getting a warning to be ready to stop, go ahead and stop, and now you're waiting. Also, in the same time, at the traffic management center, it's getting that there's an incident detected, and it shows them exactly where it is. It actually can load the profile of the people. You can see, notice one of those folks didn't opt in, so we don't know who it is and what the status of the car is, but the other person did. And so it automatically dispatches a emergency vehicle. You can see here someone's waiting to get a red-green light, but before they can, there's an emergency vehicle. It gets preemption, it goes through. It's going to come onto the freeway and go to the wreck. The people who are stopped are going to get a warning that there's an emergency vehicle approaching to pull over so the emergency vehicle can get there. The emergency vehicle arrives on the scene and takes care of all the folks and gets the cars out of the way, and then we'll see traffic is moving smoothly again. So that's one of the concepts. All right, so let's talk real briefly about the vehicle to infrastructure connected vehicle pilots. About a year ago, the US DOT came out with an RFP that said we want to award up to $20 to $24 million to multiple deployments, not to demonstrate, but to actually deploy connected vehicle technology for the vehicle to the infrastructure. So the emphasis now is getting data back and forth from the traffic management center, for example, to the vehicles. And so they went through that round. They wanted to solve real-world problems. That was one of the requirements. And you had to be able to show measurable results. A real challenge, really, this is a new area, and it's hard to measure those kind of things. It's a three-phase project. The first phase is planning. The second phase is development, deployment, and beginning operation. And the third is O&M, operations and maintenance. First round was awarded in September, and there were 3 awardees. First one was New York City. They're going to outfit 10,000 taxi cabs, or so they claim, with this technology, and also interact with the signal systems and with pedestrians. So they're going to communicate warnings about potential collisions. They're going to let pedestrians know when it's safe to cross the street, those kind of things. The next one is Wyoming. I've learned a lot about Wyoming. I'm not even part of their project, but we get to interact with them. Wyoming, along I-80 goes through Wyoming, and it's at an elevation of 7,000 feet or higher at all times, which I didn't know that any interstate was like that. So they have a lot of issues, and it's a major truck corridor, obviously. So they have a lot of issues with trucks. The video I'm about to show you, you can see something very similar to it at that length. But this video is, with the sound, is just more than convinces you that they need this technology. All right, where are we at? So every time you hear this noise, That's a truck crashing into a bunch of trucks. And just watch for a few, I don't think I have to say anything, just watch what happens over the next minute or two. Now, would you believe me if I told you there were 80 trucks down there? And they just keep coming and keep coming. So you can get a feel for, they have a problem, right? I mean, and they're going to use the SRC to help hopefully solve some of that for them, to warn truckers that there's a major collision down there. Apparently that's a real whiteout issue as well, that they just can't see anything until they're right on top of it. So. What I want to do now is talk very briefly, because I'm killing my time, on the project I'm working on, the Connected Vehicle Pilot, which is in Tampa for the Tampa-Hillsborough Expressway Authority. What you see in the yellow is what the authority actually controls as part of their expressway. The dashed black lines are the reversible lane that we'll talk about a little bit. They actually reverse that lane twice a day, in the morning inbound, and then out now. Well, I don't think it's the only one now. There was another one, but it was the first elevated reversible lane in the country. So this is the area of our pilot study. It's downtown. If you see the crosshatch street that kind of goes from top to bottom, or north to south, if you will, the reversible lane comes out and dumps into that street. So that's a study area for us. We're looking at traffic progression through there. And then in all the other areas that you see, the little circles, are different opportunities we're looking at, and I'm going to kind of cycle through those very quickly. This is only about at 1 square mile, just to give you an idea. It's not as, I thought it was much, being from San Antonio, I thought, wow, this is a big, drive down there. And suddenly I'm figuring out this is a really small place. So I've learned a lot about Tampa downtown. So the first one that we look at are backup warning and cues. So those cars that you see are coming off the reversible lane and trying to make a right turn on what's called Twig Street, which is headed toward the courthouse, and you'll find out why that's important in a minute. But what happens is that lane backs up a mile or a mile and a half onto it becomes onto the shoulder, and people will have, rear-end collisions, or people will be trying to cut in. So we're using some connected vehicle technology. We're actually using 2 V2V applications: forward collision warning and emergency electronic brake lights, so to warn someone that there's a car or vehicle stopped in front of them. We're also going to do a cue warning. We're going to be able to detect the end of the cue and then warn people with a curve speed warning app that tells, typically the curve speed warning app will just tell you it's 30 miles an hour is the safe speed. What we're going to do is make that dynamic based on the length of the cue. So as you enter the curve, it may be 30 this time, but in the morning when the cue's backed up, it may be 15. So we'll give that warning out to the folks. Wrong way incidents, same intersection. Believe it or not, people turn the wrong way. I've sat there one day and watched it. I was amazed. They come up to where you see the railroad signals. They come up here and they'll make a left and go right under that do not enter sign. And so we're going to try to detect that. They actually had a fatality of an officer there last month. He was a crime scene investigator. It was late at night. He was on the reversible expressway following a car going the right way and noticed a car coming the wrong way. And he accelerated around that person and threw his car into the wrong way driver, killed him. Of course, the wrong way driver survived, and of course, but it saved the other person's life. And so it's a big deal to them to try to get this solved. So that's one of the things. The sad part about that is this: what they found out about this guy. Just to tell you the whole story, he got on the right way, drove all the way to the end, realized that he wasn't where he needed to be, and just did a U-turn and started coming back. And his blood alcohol was like, I don't know, 1.2 or something. It was ridiculous. So we'll be using technology to try to detect that and warn. We're going to warn the driver he's going the wrong way. We're going to try to warn people who are approaching that there is a wrong way driver, and then we're going to get the information to the Traffic Management Center and law enforcement. Pedestrian Safety, you heard me talk about twigs in the courthouse. Every Monday and Tuesday, they have about 400 or 500, I think this is every city, they have 400 or 500 people come down for jury duty, don't know where they're going, haven't been there before. They got to get in the parking garage, get across the street to the courthouse, and the only thing they have is this crosswalk with a flashing light. And so there's a lot of near misses there. We're actually going to use communications between the vehicle, the roadside, and the pedestrian. We're going to use I'm calling it a personal information device. We don't know if it's going to be a smartphone or we're going to try to use some other device to do this with, but we're going to have people outfitted with that so that if they walk into the crosswalk and there's a car coming that can't stop, we're going to tell them, hey, there's a car coming that's going to hit you. And the same thing for the car. Car will receive a warning, there's a pedestrian about to walk in your path. So the idea is that we create those, we get rid of those conflicts. And of course you have the people who are really late that decide, oh, guess what? I just go across the street wherever I can, as fast as I can. So we're going to also try to help vehicles know about the jaywalkers as they come around. Bus priority, so they have situations there where their buses be on schedule, but suddenly the intersection will back up with traffic and the bus can't even get into its bus stop, or it can't get out of the bus stop because of traffic, or the bus is just behind schedule. Take your pick. But we're going to use priority with that. So when the bus is behind schedule, we're going to turn the light green automatically and flush the queue out so the bus can get in or get out, or give the bus the green so it can get on its way and try to make up time. They have a streetcar there. It's run by the Tampa Electric Company called TECO. The streetcar is in its own dedicated lane with a little 6-inch curb between it and the main lanes, but it comes up, it has its own set of lights as well. So it comes up to an intersection, it has lights it has to obey, but those lights may be a little different than the traffic going along. So it's, as a trolley may have stopped to pick up people and get ready to start up again, it's legal, of course, for the car to make a right turn on red in front of it, not in front of it, but to make a right turn on red. And so what happens is cars turn in front of the trolley and there's a potential collision there. So there's an application that we're going to use to warn the trolley driver that someone's actually making a right turn. And we're going to extend the pedestrian application we just talked about to over here as well. So as pedestrians are getting off and they go to cross the street, if that car is making a right, they'll get a warning as well not to enter into the crosswalk. This was the one I mentioned while we were looking at the overview. This is down what we call Meridian Avenue. And that morning it backs up due to the traffic coming off the reversible express lane. And so we're going to use traffic signal and timing to improve the traffic flow there to get more movement through, as well as help pedestrians manage that area as well. A lot of people, this is one of the revitalized areas that they're building up with condos and things like that, so a lot of people are walking and biking. So how do we prepare? Well, we have to proceed with caution. We can't just run around and do this. I mean, you can't just implement it, as though many people would like us to. So the first thing we think is you got to focus on Transportation Systems Management and Operations, or TSM&O. That's really kind of the umbrella for everything that is done from a traffic management perspective. Active traffic management, intelligent transportation systems, multimodal, you name it, kind of falls under the umbrella. Using big data and figuring out how to utilize that data to help not only solve some of your problems, but also to help you gather your statistics. And then, you know, there's going to be this whole idea of these new operational solutions. This is not going to be business as usual or your mother's apple pie. This is going to be a whole new way of thinking and doing things as we start to roll out this whole new technology. We got to be systematic in how we do it. You don't want to just say, okay, I'm going to go put out 10,000 RSUs here in the city of Houston, and it's all going to work. You got to plan for what you're going to do, where you're going to do it, and how you're going to do it. You got to get your resources ready, so maintenance of your current system is important, as well as being able to train them. This is a new world. This is not just taking apart a signal controller or a signal head and repairing it. This is really looking at software programming, information technology, networks, and things like that. New policies are going to have to come out, right? And planning and procedures. This again is not the same way that you've done business. And then working with the private industry. How do we move that forward? How do they play a role in it? PPPs, P3s are going to be very important in this world. And then you got to educate internally and the public. That's the biggest challenge. Is everybody here's connected vehicle, they think it's autonomous vehicle, and you just got to really educate. So what else is there? Well, you got money. You only have so much money, so you have to figure out how to use it. And you have to figure out how to keep your current system going while trying to look at this new technology and where it fits into your world. When do you want to? When should you start to invest? When should you start to move that way? I would encourage you strongly to work with TxDOT, the City of Houston. That's where the success is going to come. I will tell you point blank, USDOT is not going to fund this long term. And the biggest bang for the buck for vehicle to infrastructure is on your arterials. Who controls the arterials? City, right? So the city, H-GAC, you guys are the ones that are going to really have to do this if you're going to do it in Houston. It's not going to be TxDOT. TxDOT will help, but they do freeway management, and they'll use the technology for freeway management, but your biggest bang for your buck is going to come on your arterials. You got to look at new traffic models and forecasting. You know, what other needs are there for data for the public? Are there new design standards like we talked about earlier, adding a lane by just simply reducing the size of the lanes? And then what other technologies are coming, right? We think this is the end, but it's not. You know, in 10 years, there's going to be something else, and we've got to be ready for that. I'm amazed at people with their Apple Watches. It's crazy. And somebody's selling a car now that you can use your Apple Watch to unlock it and start it. I saw a commercial for it. So it's a game changer. I think the book's going to be rewritten. I think this is where we're headed. There's a fair amount of naysayers out there, but there's also a lot more people saying, go, 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 go. You know, let's get it where I don't have to do anything but sit and get me where I need to be. You know, we got the integration coming, and of course the engineering and operational concepts will all have to change. And I'm sorry I'm going through these, but I'm really running over. So technical challenges, probably the biggest one is that first bullet, interoperability. Everything has to work together. You got 10 manufacturers out there, they all have to talk and work together. You got however many OEMs out there, they all have to talk and work together. And then standards, we have to have one standard, not 20. There'll be institutional challenges. This is something you guys will be wrestling with over the next 5 to 10 years, trying to figure out what to do. Again, I think number 2 is very important. Of course, 1, funding is always the most important, but 2 is that your skill set's going to change for who supports this stuff. That's the guy I got. I'm sorry I ran over. I'm happy. I can stay as long as you want if you have any questions. But I hope.
Does another country have any advancement?
Oh, sure. That's a great question. Actually, specifically autonomous, the Japanese have quite a bit going on in their world. They have some, in fact, the Bordeaux shuttle, the autonomous shuttle that moved people back and forth is a Japan product. The Europeans are also moving forward. From our perspective, both the Europeans are ahead of everybody in terms of both autonomous and connected vehicle. You know, because of our biggest drawback, which we really didn't talk a lot about, but our biggest drawback here in our country to keep getting this really rolling is personal private information. You know, over in Europe, it's a socialist world, and so your PII is really not protected. So it's a lot easier to accomplish the things they want to do because they don't have to worry about it. Here we have to worry about that a lot. And so that limits how we look at things. It's just like the basic safety message I was saying earlier. Don't really know who you are. But if I knew who you are and I knew where you wanted to go, I could help you get there a whole lot faster. But since we have to protect privacy, we can't do that. But really, to answer your question, yeah, Europe and Asia both, specifically Japan, are moving forward very quickly. And they're going to be there. BMW, Audi, all those guys have autonomous vehicles running around in Europe. Anything else? Yes, sir.
So our infrastructure, our roads here are not like Houston roads with a lot of big tires. What does this mean for our infrastructure? Does it need to be redesigned? I mean, what does it mean for the roads themselves?
The physical roads?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not a road guy, so I don't know if I can answer that. But I can give you an example of what I wish we had a video of it because it would be very fun to watch. But think about this. If all the vehicles are communicating with each other and they're communicating with the signal controller in real time, and you're assuming 100% penetration at this point, so there's no outliers. Do you need traffic signals? The answer is no. Your car will get a message from the controller. It tells you at this speed you need to be. You'll be in the intersection at this time. You'll basically get a reservation to be in that intersection, and cars will crisscross through there. Will we ever see that? I doubt it. Well, yeah, that's going to be a different issue, right, with pedestrians. How do you get them across? So you'll have to have some form of that, but in theory, so I mean that's kind of the best thing. That's not a great example. But part of the problem is quite frankly, is that while the USDOT has been pushing this, many of the DOTs have had their head in their sand and continue to pour millions and billions of dollars into asphalt and concrete. And if they would just take 10% of that budget and push it over toward the technology would get there a lot faster. And we could start to understand that and what the impact is. I know I'm talking more about freeways, but that's also going to roll out through the arterials. Yes, sir.
Is there, in your opinion, is there enough information known about the potential capacity effects both on arterials and freeways to people who are doing long-range planning to make somewhat educated guesses as to what that means in terms of how much money that are sizing and locating new facilities, that they can do at least a defensible job of in trying to account for that impact in their long-range planning?
I'll give you two different answers to that. One is that there are places where, and it's mostly at the state level, but I think there's a couple of local agencies that in their 2040, 2050 plans, because that's what you do 20, 40 years out, right? They're putting this kind of stuff in there. They're not really saying what the effect's going to be, but they're at least putting it in there, because if you don't put it in there, it's going to be a problem when it happens. There are universities out there. TTI is probably the best resource, obviously here in Texas, but UMTRI up in Michigan, VTTI, Virginia Tech, they all have been looking at that problem and trying to understand. So my advice, I don't have an answer for you, but my advice would be to reach out to those guys and talk with them, because TTI just last week ago, I think they had a big groundbreaking ceremony for a whole autonomous area that they're building out there at the Riverside campus. So they're all. This is like their main focus from my perspective.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
The safety benefits that you talked about, connected vehicles and autonomous vehicles will contribute to that. But I wonder what the break-off would be. How much benefit can you get with the connected vehicle? And then how do you get to overall, which I believe is the autonomous vehicle?
That's a good question, because the reality is, right, everything fails. The hardware in the car is going to fail. Somebody's car is not going to communicate. You're still going to have a wreck. The sensor that you're using on your car is fail, that's going to move into the lane where there's a car. So I think you're always going to have crashes. Now, can we get to the point where maybe our crashes don't kill people because they're more fender bender type? Maybe. Because the other car hopefully is also responding to what's happening around it. And so if it realizes something's about to move into it, maybe it can get out of the way a little bit before something bad happens. But you know, it'll be interesting. You know, no one. You bring up a good point though. No one. The 80% number that I use and quote is for connected vehicles only. Has nothing to do with autonomous. That was done before autonomous vehicles hit the scene. No one's really tried to quantify what happens when autonomous vehicles are rolled into that. I've never heard a number for that. I think people are assuming 0, which is bad.